The glass doors slammed shut behind him as Mr. Jonathan Reeves stormed into the lobby. His tailored navy suit clung to his tall frame, his jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from stone. The morning sun lit the marble floors, but the room felt cold as his voice echoed through the open space. "Who left the conference room like this?" he barked, his tone slicing through the stillness. The receptionist flinched. A young intern spilled her coffee, but all eyes turned toward a petite woman on her knees, quietly scrubbing the corners of the floor. Her name tag read Marta. She didn't look up. She was used to this, scrubbing floors while pretending she was invisible. But today was different. "I asked a question." Jonathan's voice rose again. His polished shoes tapped aggressively toward her. "This is unacceptable. How many times do I have to say, clean up before my meetings, not after?" Still, Marta didn't respond. Her shoulders hunched lower, as if shrinking might protect her. Then, a tiny voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, sir." Everyone turned. A little girl stood near the front desk, no older than 6. She clutched a pink backpack and wore a worn school uniform 2 sizes too big. Her dark curls bounced as she walked straight toward Jonathan. "I'm her daughter," the girl said, standing between him and her mother. "And you shouldn't yell at her like that." Silence. Deafening silence. Jonathan blinked, clearly stunned by the girl's courage. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Marta looked up, horrified. "No, Alma, please, baby, go wait outside." But Alma wasn't done. "She comes here before the sun wakes up. She works hard so I can eat breakfast. And you want me to talk to her like she's not a person." Her small hands balled into fists. Her voice trembled, but her chin was high. A murmur spread across the lobby. Phones stopped ringing. Emails stopped typing. For a moment, the entire office froze, held captive by the weight of a child's truth. Jonathan took a slow step back. His face, normally unreadable, betrayed a flicker of something. Guilt? Shame? He looked around. Everyone was still watching. And Marta? She was trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper. From the years of silence finally being broken. From the sound of her daughter's voice being louder than the shame she'd swallowed for so long. Jonathan cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "This isn't the time or place for—" "It's always the time," Alma interrupted. "If someone's being mean." You could hear the elevator ding in the distance. That's how quiet it got. Marta slowly got to her feet. She touched her daughter's shoulder gently, her eyes wet. "Alma, thank you. But let's go." As they walked away, people watched in silence. No one stopped them. No one dared. And Jonathan? He stood frozen, a titan in a $1,000 suit, brought to stillness by a child's simple act of bravery. And yet this wasn't the first time Marta had been humiliated. It wasn't even the worst. But today something shifted. A spotlight had finally turned toward her. And behind that spotlight was a long road of pain no one ever saw. Before we dive deeper into this journey, if you enjoy stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. Years before Marta stood in that lobby, silenced by power and defended by a 6-year-old girl, she had been a woman with dreams so vivid they kept her awake at night. Back in her hometown in rural Mexico, she had once danced under festival lights, laughed in sunlit courtyards, and helped her mother sell flowers at the plaza. Her world was not rich, but it was full of warmth, music, and the belief that hard work could shape destiny. She married young, to a man with soft eyes and rough hands, who promised to take care of her and the baby growing inside her. For a while they were happy. But life is rarely as kind as hope imagines. When Alma was 2, her father left. No warning, no goodbye, just a torn note and an empty bank account. Marta waited, weeks, then months, until the waiting broke her heart into silence. She knew crying wouldn't feed her daughter, so she stopped. She packed what little she owned and crossed a border with Alma, asleep against her chest, and fear pounding in her chest like a war drum. The city was louder, colder, less forgiving. She took whatever job she could find: kitchens, laundromats, warehouses, places where nobody asked for papers and everyone looked the other way. She cleaned during the night and cared for Alma during the day. Sleep became a luxury, exhaustion a constant companion. But Marta endured it all, driven by one unshakable thought: Alma deserves a life better than mine. They rented a single room in a basement. Mold lined the walls, and the only window was small and sealed shut. Marta turned cardboard into playhouses, tin cans into musical toys. Alma never complained, not once. But Marta saw the questions in her eyes. When schoolmates had new shoes, when birthdays passed with no candles, when the landlord pounded at their door at night asking for rent. Marta found the cleaning job at the corporate tower by accident. Someone got sick, she filled in. Then they asked her to stay. The hours were brutal, the pay barely enough, but it was something. And even though she entered through the back service door, even though the executives never looked her in the eye, Marta showed up early. She scrubbed with care. She believed that quiet dignity was still a kind of strength. But every day chipped away at something inside her. The way the suits ignored her, the times she overheard their jokes, the way she was spoken to like she was part of the floor. She told herself it didn't matter, as long as Alma was safe, as long as she had food. Still, there were nights Marta cried silently in the shower, where the hot water couldn't wash away the ache in her chest, the ache of being invisible, of being broken but pretending to be whole. She never let Alma see that side, never. Her daughter saw a strong mother, one who braided her hair, packed her lunch, and whispered stories in Spanish when nightmares came. But what no one in that lobby knew, what Jonathan Reeves certainly didn't know, was that Marta had built a life out of scraps. She had carried her daughter through storms no one could name, and every insult, every moment of dismissal, was a bruise layered on a woman already covered in scars no one could see. Until that day, the day Alma spoke up. Because while Marta had been surviving, Alma had been watching, learning, and now the daughter she raised to be quiet was learning how to roar. The day after the incident in the lobby, Marta walked into work with her head lower than usual. Alma had kissed her goodbye at the bus stop, her tiny hand waving through the window, not knowing the storm that had begun to brew behind the polished glass walls of the office building. Marta knew what happens to women like her when they're noticed. Cleaning crews were supposed to be invisible, silent, replaceable. And now? Now she was a name whispered in meetings, a face remembered not for a mistake, but for disruption. By 10 a.m., she was summoned. A woman from HR with a permanent forced smile asked her to sit. Marta's hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. She had seen this look before, the calm before the corporate cruelty. "We just want to ensure a professional environment," the woman began. "And what happened yesterday made a lot of people uncomfortable." Marta opened her mouth to speak, but the words got stuck behind a wall of fear. She had crossed deserts. She had been hungry. But somehow, this sterile room felt more suffocating than any of it. "Some clients were present," the HR woman added, "and we're reviewing whether it's appropriate for your daughter to be on site." Marta nodded slowly. She only brought Alma when the sitter canceled. Never during peak hours. Always quiet. Always respectful. But rules, it seemed, been only for those who wore suits. When she left the office, her supervisor, Carl, was waiting. He didn't smile. He handed her a new schedule. Split shifts, fewer hours, less pay. "Consequences," he said flatly, "for the distraction." Marta didn't argue. She simply nodded and walked back to her mop, feeling smaller than ever. She worked the rest of the day in silence, cheeks hot, tears threatening to spill but never falling. That night, Marta sat at the kitchen table long after Alma had gone to bed. The single light above flickered as she stared at her schedule. Rent was due in 4 days. Food was already running low. If her hours were cut again, she'd have to choose heat or groceries. For the first time in years, doubt crept into her heart. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe silence was safer. Maybe Alma shouldn't have said anything. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. As Marta entered the building, the receptionist, usually glued to her screen, stood up. "Good morning, Marta." The words were soft, hesitant, but sincere. Marta blinked, unsure how to respond. In the elevator, an intern from marketing looked at her and said, "Your daughter's really brave." Marta offered a weak smile, her throat too tight for words. Then, as she stepped out on her floor, she noticed a note taped to the janitor's closet. For words, scribbled in thick black marker. "You matter. We see you." Her breath caught. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Someone had seen her. Someone cared. But Carl saw it too. He ripped the note down that afternoon, crumpled it in his fist, and tossed it in the trash. "No politics at work," he muttered. "Stick to your job." And just like that, the kindness felt like it had never existed. But seeds, once planted, don't vanish. They wait, quietly, and Marta, though shaken, began to notice them. A younger coworker asking if she needed help. An executive holding the door open. Small things, soft things. Proof that Alma's words hadn't just shaken Jonathan Reeves. They had awakened something Marta didn't dare hope for. Change. Still, the worst was yet to come. Because Jonathan Reeves hadn't forgotten that morning. And people like him, they don't let go easily. Jonathan Reeves watched the security footage over and over again. Not because he didn't remember the moment clearly, but because he couldn't stop thinking about the girl's eyes. That unshakable stare, so small yet so fierce, had pierced through years of boardroom dominance and bulletproof confidence. He didn't know why it got under his skin. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was pride stung by being called out in front of his entire staff. But whatever it was, he wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who mopped his floors. "She embarrassed me," he muttered during a private meeting with his inner circle. "In my own building." One of the executives shifted uncomfortably. "It was a child, sir." But Jonathan's jaw tightened. It was a statement. And if we allow it, what comes next? Cleaners telling us how to run our company. The others nodded, not because they agreed, but because men like Reeves didn't tolerate opposition. A few days later, Marta was reassigned. No warning, just a terse email from HR. Effective immediately. Your role will shift to the parking level and exterior maintenance. It was the lowest of the low. Outside, exposed to wind and rain, cleaning cigarette butts and scraping gum off sidewalks. Marta stood in the cold, numb. Her gloves were too thin. Her boots had holes. And her dignity, once a shield, now felt like shattered glass beneath her feet. She didn't tell Alma. She couldn't. Every night, she walked in with a tired smile and asked about school. Alma would talk about books and math, and Marta would nod, pretending her body didn't ache from bending over sidewalks all day. But one night, Alma noticed the raw red skin on her mother's hands. "Mom, are you okay?" Marta hesitated, then lied. "Just cold, Majida. I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. She was breaking. Still, every morning, she showed up. Rain or shine, she cleaned with precision. Not because she owed them anything, but because she owed herself that much. Quietly, she began to collect moments. A manager offering her a cup of coffee. A secretary whispering, "What they did to you is wrong." Small cracks in the wall that had kept her unseen. Then one afternoon, as Marta swept near the main entrance, she heard footsteps approach. She didn't look up until she heard the voice. "Jonathan Reeves, you're still here?" he asked, incredulous. "After all this?" Marta straightened slowly. Her hands were raw, her back ached, but her voice was steady. "Yes, I'm still here." He studied her, searching for defiance. Instead, he found something worse, dignity. It unsettled him. You could have just stayed quiet, saved yourself the trouble. Marta looked him in the eye. "Maybe. But then my daughter would think silence is the price of survival, and I won't teach her that." Jonathan scoffed and walked off, but his steps were slower, less certain. Inside the building, the whispers had turned into quiet conversations. Employees who once looked past Marta now spoke of her with respect. Not loudly, never loudly, but the current was shifting. Even if the leadership was trying to bury her, Marta had become something more powerful than they expected. A symbol, not of protest, but of quiet resistance, of unshakable grace. Still, Marta knew this wasn't a fairy tale. Power doesn't surrender easily, and the next move Jonathan was planning wasn't just meant to silence her. It was meant to erase her completely. 2 weeks after her demotion, Marta received a letter, folded neatly in a plain white envelope with no return address. It was waiting on her locker shelf, oddly pristine against the rusted metal. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. "Your contract has been reviewed. Due to recent restructuring, your position is being terminated effective immediately. Please collect your belongings." That was it. No explanation. No thank you. No chance to fight back. She stared at the words, unblinking. Her breath caught somewhere in her chest. The hallway around her spun slightly, the sound of distant vacuums and footsteps fading into a painful silence. It wasn't just a job being taken, it was everything. Rent, food, medicine for Alma's asthma, stability, hope. A supervisor walked by. Didn't even look at her. She was a ghost again, discarded. She packed her things, what little she had, into a reused shopping bag. Her name badge, a spare pair of gloves, Alma's crayon drawing taped to the inside of the locker. Me and Mama, smiling. Marta stared at it for a long moment, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her coat pocket. As she exited the building through the rear door, the sky was gray, the air biting. Marta pulled her scarf tighter, fighting tears. She didn't want Alma to see her broken. She had been so strong for so long. But as she turned the corner, a voice called out. "Marta?" She turned, startled. It was Naomi, the young intern who'd always smiled at her in the elevator. Breathless, Naomi caught up, holding a small portfolio clutched to her chest. "I heard what they did. It's not right. None of this is..." Marta blinked, too numb to speak. Naomi continued. "You don't know me well, but my mom was a cleaner too. Back in Dublin. I saw what that did to her. How people treated her. I told myself I'd never let that happen again if I had a voice." Marta gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "What can a voice do against people like him?" Naomi's eyes lit up. "You'd be surprised." She handed Marta the folder. "This is a letter I wrote. It details what happened. Witness accounts. The footage. I sent copies to the board of directors anonymously. I know someone there, they'll see it." Marta's jaw tightened. "He'll come after you." "I'm not afraid," Naomi said. "You were never afraid. And your daughter?" She reminded all of us what courage looks like. Tears welled in Marta's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Naomi replied, stepping back. "Just don't give up, please. They want you to disappear. Don't let them win." That night, Marta sat on her bed while Alma slept beside her, curled like a kitten. The apartment was colder than usual. She read Naomi's letter 3 times. With each word, something in her chest stirred, like a match waiting to be struck. She remembered Alma standing in front of Jonathan Reeves, remembered her own mother, selling flowers with cracked hands but a fierce smile, remembered the endless hours cleaning floors no one noticed. Marta folded the letter and placed it beside Alma's drawing. The next morning she put on her coat, laced her broken boots, and walked, not to the office, but to the public library. She sat at a computer and opened a new email. She began typing to a local journalist whose stories she had followed quietly for years. Subject line: "I was fired for my daughter's courage, and I'm not staying silent anymore." Because Marta finally understood, silence protects power. But truth? Truth can crack it wide open. The article went live on a Monday morning. Tucked between political headlines and weather updates, it appeared on the homepage of a local newspaper under the title: "Cleaner fired after daughter stood up to CEO. Company under fire." Marta hadn't expected much. Maybe a few clicks. Maybe a moment of sympathy lost in the scroll. But by noon, the story had caught fire. Shares, comments, emails. People were angry, not just for Marta, but because the story echoed something deeper, something millions had felt but never spoken. The humiliation of being ignored, the ache of being treated like a tool instead of a person, the fury of seeing the powerful crush the powerless without consequence. Within 24 hours, the headline had been picked up by national outlets. Talk shows began mentioning it. Social media lit up with hashtags. Hashtag Alma's Voice and hashtag We See You Marta. Strangers donated to a fundraiser started by Naomi. In 3 days, it passed $20,000. But it wasn't the money that made Marta cry. It was the messages, hundreds of them, from janitors, waitresses, caregivers, immigrants, women who had carried worlds on their backs and never heard their names spoken with respect. "Your story is mine. I clean too. Thank you for making me feel visible. I showed my daughter your photo. I told her, this is what bravery looks like." Back in the glossy halls of the office building, things were unraveling. The board received anonymous emails, screenshots, footage. Naomi's letter had reached the right hands. Jonathan Reeves was called into a private meeting where questions turned into accusations. His dismissive answers, his smirk, they only made things worse. The board, sensing the storm, released a bland public statement about restructuring and reviewing internal practices. But it wasn't enough. Employees began to speak, not just about Marta, but about years of toxic culture, bullying, silencing. And then a video surfaced. Someone had recorded the original confrontation in the lobby. Alma, tiny but bold, standing between her mother and a man worth millions. Her voice small but piercing, saying, "She works hard so I can eat breakfast." That video shattered the internet. Within hours, it had millions of views. Alma became a symbol, not of rebellion, but of honesty, of the uncomfortable truth no one wanted to face, that we build castles on the backs of people we refuse to see. TV networks reached out, activists, even celebrities. But Marta said no to interviews, no to press tours. She didn't want fame. She wanted dignity. And then something no one expected happened. Jonathan Reeves resigned. It was spun as personal reasons, but everyone knew. He didn't apologize. He didn't look back. He simply vanished from the company that once worshipped him. A titan brought down not by scandal, but by a 6-year-old girl and a mother who refused to break. The cleaning company, now under pressure, publicly offered Marta her job back, with better pay and full benefits. They even offered to make her supervisor. But Marta declined. Instead, she used part of the donations to enroll in a business course. She had dreams, real ones now. She'd start her own cleaning company, one that treated workers like family, one where no one had to enter through the back door. As the noise began to settle and the news cycle moved on, Marta returned home one evening to find Alma sitting at the table, writing. "What are you working on, mi amor?" Marta asked. "A story," Alma said, "about a superhero." "Oh, and what's her power?" Alma looked up, grinned, and replied, "She doesn't let people be mean, and she always tells the truth." 1 year later, on a crisp autumn morning, Marta stood in front of a glass door with a small golden sign that read, "Alma's Cleaning and Care Services." It wasn't a skyscraper. It wasn't a tower of marble. It was a cozy office on the corner of a busy street, with flower pots by the entrance and laughter drifting from inside. But to Marta, it was her empire, built not with wealth, but with worth, not with privilege, but with persistence. She had hired 5 women, 2 of whom had once been homeless, one who had fled an abusive home, and another who spoke no English but cleaned like her hands were telling story. They wore uniforms that fit. They were paid on time. They were seen. Every week, Marta held meetings not to demand, but to listen. She kept a wall in the office with photos of every employee and their families. She called it the Why Wall, because every one of them had a reason, a child, a dream, a promise. One morning, while reviewing a client request, Marta got an unexpected email. It was from Reeves Holdings, her old company. They wanted to outsource their new eco-cleaning initiative to a reputable local provider. And her name had come up. She stared at the screen for a long moment. She could have deleted it. She could have laughed. But instead, she clicked reply. 2 weeks later, she walked through the same revolving doors she had once exited with tears in her eyes. But this time, she wore a tailored navy blazer, not to blend in, but to own the space. Alma walked beside her, now 7, holding a clipboard with their new company logo on it. The lobby went silent. Some recognized her, some didn't. But when the new CEO approached with a handshake and a genuine smile, Marta returned it without hesitation. She toured the building. She reviewed the proposal. She negotiated better pay for her team. She spoke not as a cleaner, but as a partner. And then, as they walked past the janitor's closet she once cried in, Alma tugged on her sleeve. "Mama," she whispered, "do you remember this place?" Marta nodded, her eyes misty. "I do." Alma smiled. "We don't belong in the back anymore, do we?" Marta knelt, brushing her daughter's curls back gently. "No, mi amor, we never did. We just forgot we had the right to walk through the front." They left the building that day not with vengeance, but with victory. Later that week, Marta stood before a group of young women at a local community center. She had been invited to speak. The flyer read, "From cleaner to CEO, a mother's journey." She told them the truth, that strength doesn't always roar. It sometimes scrubs floors in silence. That being unseen doesn't mean you're unworthy. That sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truth. And when she finished, the room was silent, not from boredom, but from awe. A single mother who had nothing but her hands, her back, and her child had changed everything. As applause filled the room, Marta looked to the back, where Alma sat, beaming with pride. And in that moment, she knew it was never about revenge. It was about rewriting the story, not just for her, but for every person who ever walked through the back door and dared to dream of the front. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, share this video, and tell us in the comments what part of this journey moved you the most. There's another story waiting for you, and it might just change the way you see the world. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.